Chris here at the Handle It Warehouse. You just received your Handle It Model 1100AA-C stretch wrapper. As you can see, this unit shipped fully assembled. Typically we ship it fully assembled, but sometimes we do ship it knocked down and crated. If that's the case, it's a very simple process to install it. We have that paperwork for you. It's pretty much you're tipping up the tower and you're going to secure the mast and you're going to install the carriage. So very easy process. Couple things to keep in mind before you put it in place. You have actually three things to think of. One is your power source. You have your air supply to think of that you can reach. And also you want to think of the orientation of how you want to load and unload the stretch wrapper. As far as the power source goes, you want to be close enough to an outlet where you're not using an extension cord. You also want to make sure that it's a dedicated line of power at a 110 outlet. Also no GFI outlets, because if you use that, you're going to trip the breaker. Next thing would be the air supply. Like I said, make sure you're close enough to the air supply. If you don't have an air supply, you can use an air compressor, like a portable one. The minimum requirement for that would be 8 gallons and 90 PSI. As far as the orientation goes, we'll talk about that in a second. For right now, let's go plug in this unit. Now let's hook up the air supply. So I mentioned before, when you're putting this unit in place, you want to keep in mind how you want to load the stretch wrapper. So in this case, we're going to be side loading. So we're going to come with a forklift in this way and loading it here. It's basically the only option we have because we have pallets there, we have a wall there. If that wasn't there, you could do front loading or side loading from this way. If you do front loading, which a lot of people want to front load, you want to keep in mind as you're coming back with the pallet, you don't want to be hitting the ceiling unit or dropping the pallet on there. And it's hard to see if you're in the forklift over there. We do ship a mirror that can go up here so you can kind of see it better. And then also I would recommend getting a wheel stop over there so you don't come back too far. But if you are going to front load, definitely what I would recommend instead of doing all that is we can change the orientation of this so that it's at the 9 o'clock or the 3 o'clock position. That way you're basically loading from the front, but you are side loading, which is the easier way of going about it. Let's go ahead and power the unit on. Just hit the on button here. And when you turn it on, it's always gonna ask for a reset request. So you can see it there. So just hit reset here. And what that'll do is if the carriage or the turntable weren't at the home position, it would bring it back to them. In this case, they already are, so nothing moved. It beeps back at you to let you know that you're good to go. Next thing we want to do is load the film. A couple things to keep in mind. You'd want to use machine grade film and also a 20-inch roll. If you have hand grade film, you don't want to use that because it will tear. Now, as far as changing the film out, I could go ahead and bend over and change it down here, but this machine has a very nice feature where if I go over to the coil change procedure, it'll bring this up to an ergonomic height so that way I can change it at a higher level. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to do that. So if I go to the jog minus button and go down to coil change procedure and hit OK, it's going to bring the carriage up to the height that I want to change the film over at. And you can adjust this if you want to different heights. All right, in order to load the film, just pick it up, set it here on this spindle, make sure it's all the way down. Then you want to open up this carriage door like this, and then the film just goes through here and around this roller. And it's very important you have it around that roller. Hear that? It's engaging these pre-stretch rollers. So this unit comes standard with the pre-stretch carriage, which these are the pre-stretch rollers. So as I pull on this, it's engaging that so I can get it out. Then you just close the door like so, and we're good to go. So now that we have the film loaded, we want to put the film under this plier hand here. That way it's basically setting up the auto attach. The only time you're gonna have to do this is when you're loading new film, or if you have a tear in the film and you have to start over the process. But typically the machine would do this automatically after you wrap the next pallet. So a couple other things I want to point out. Well, another thing I want to point out is right here. This is the thermostat for the ceiling unit. So it's showing 170 degrees right now. You can change that temperature. The only reason you really do that is if, let's say you have thicker film and it's not warming up enough in order to get that heat seal on the pallet. But otherwise, you're really not going to touch that at all. Now that we have the unit in place, we have it powered up, we have the film loaded, and we have the film secured to the pallet along with the air supply hooked up. Let's move to the next step. I'll show you how the controls work. So going over the control panel, we'll go top to bottom and point out the controls. Very top here, we have the USB connection. This is normally covered up, but we just have it open so you can see. What that is, at the factory, we'll upload certain values to the machine of preset wrap cycles for you, so that when you get it, you have some presets. Benefit to you if you have the machine and something happens and someone kind of goes in and messes with the controls and you want it back to a factory default, we can send you an email so you can upload the USB to here and get back to factory default. Down from there, you have the power indicator. As you can see, it's blinking because the unit's on. Then you have the status indicator. If the machine's in use, that would be blinking. Then you have the start button. So that's used to start an automatic wrapping cycle. Also, if you hold the start button during a wrap cycle, it'll stop the carriage movement as the turntable continues to spin so that it reinforces wrapping in the area it was stopped at. From there, you have stop. This stops the wrapping cycle. If you hit start again, the wrap cycle will pick up where it left off. So essentially, you're pausing the wrap cycle when you hit stop. Reset initializes the machine to its home position when the machine is powered on or after an emergency. Also, let's say you hit the stop button and you wanted to start your wrap cycle all over, then you would hit reset because it's going to start from the beginning again. From there, you have the on-off button, pretty self-explanatory. From up here, actually, you do have the display. So this is when you're going through the programs, you can actually see what's on there. Then you have the jog plus and jog minus buttons. These are used to scroll through the menus and set parameter values. Then you have OK. This is used to select the menu option, enter the current view or setting level, and it's used to confirm values you have entered. From here, you have escape. This is used to exit a menu or parameter, to go back to the previous level, or to cancel the value you have entered. So below this, you have 6 icons. These are for dual usage. So the factory default is that each one is a quick select for saved pallets 1 through 6. So you can see like pallet 1, pallet 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you want to change this, you can enable the function keys in the program in here. And what that'll do is make these live. So basically, instead of hitting this and it's pallet 1, it's turntable speed. You know, this pallet 2 would not be pallet 2, it would be tension. This would be carriage down speed. This would be up speed. This would be top wraps. This would be bottom wraps. So if you enable those functions, then as you're wrapping a pallet, and let's say you wanted to quickly speed up the turntable or set the tension higher, you can do it quickly through this way. But most of the time, and the way we send it out, it is the 1 through 6, pallet 1 through 6. That's, you know, the most part, that's how people use it. Below that, you have the emergency stop button. Just push that in and it's gonna stop the machine right away. To disengage it, just twist to the left and pull out. And then once you do that, it's gonna say press escape and it's gonna ask for a reset. So then you would reset it, then you can continue on with what you were doing. Now that we have the pallet loaded, selecting your wrap cycle is very easy. So basically, you're gonna already have pre-saved at least 1 through 6 pallet configurations in there. You can adjust them to your liking, and we'll show you that in a second, how you would do that. But assume we have 1 through 6 how we want it. So all you're gonna do is you just choose 1 through 6 here. So it's at 1. So let's say I'm gonna be on 1 most of the time. And then I would normally go and attach the film to the pallet over there, but since this has auto attach, we don't have to do that. And then what I normally do too after that would go up there and hit start. But since you have a remote control, you'd be on the forklift and you would just use this and start your cycle. So you point up at the receiver, hold the blue button in, and it would start it. So I want to show you guys how to use manual mode on this machine. It really is something that you shouldn't use because it's an automatic machine, so you're kind of defeating the purpose of what it's made for. And you already have pre-saved pallet configurations in there. But if you want to use manual mode, I'm going to walk you through that and show you how that goes. So let's take a walk over here to the control panel and show you. So to get to manual mode, you just hit the jog down button and you scroll through here and get down to manual controls. Hit OK. Hit OK one more time. And if I hit jog up, carriage will go up. If I hit jog down, carriage will go down. And if I hold this in, the turntable is going to spin. So I'm going to hold it in now. If I don't hold it in any longer, stop, so stop. But if I keep holding it in until it beeps, it's gonna keep spinning. Now it's gonna keep going. So now I'm gonna raise the carriage up. The turntable is gonna keep spinning until I stop it. And I'm manually raising the carriage up. And I'm holding it in. So let's say I'm getting towards the top here and I decide, you know, hey, that's good enough. I'm gonna let it spin for a little bit. And I figure, hey, I got enough wraps there. I'm gonna bring it back down. I'm gonna hold the jog button down. I'm just gonna hold it down until I get all the way to the bottom. Now I'm at the bottom and I'm gonna hit OK to stop it. I wanna show you the menu options on here. They can seem a little intimidating because there's a lot there. Honestly, you probably won't use all what I'm gonna show you, but it's nice to know what there is and what you can do, because if you have a lot of variability in your wrap cycle, you can do a lot with this machine. Let's take a look and I'll show you what we have. So if you hit the jog down button, it's gonna get you to the main menu. First thing you see here flashing is function keys. This is where you would enable the 6 icons on the control panel to either serve as quick start pallets 1 through 6. So you can see P1 through P6, or you could change them to the ability to select the setting that corresponds to the picture that's in there. You can see here, when we ship it out, we have it as P1 through P6. Then you have Save User Program. This is where you would input the pre-configured pallet wrap cycle and save any changes you made to it. Then you have Load User Program. If you're wanting to use any saved pallet wrap cycles besides the quick select, those 1 through 6 I discussed, you would do that here, because you can save up to 32 pallet cycles on this machine. So for example, you wanted to select save pallet number 7, you would do it right here. Then you have cycle type. This is where you would select the type of cycle you'd want to run. For example, if you want the machine to wrap the pallet with the carriage going up to the top of the pallet and then back down, or if you would want it to only wrap upward and then stop, or if you wanted to start at the top and go downwards. There's some more detail on that we'll do in another video. Cycle parameters, this is where you really fine tune how you want the pallet to be wrapped. So you can change anything from the tension, the turntable speed, the carriage speed, the number of bottom and top wraps. Here, there's a lot more you can do as well. We'll go through that specifically in another video. Then you have manual controls, which we talked about earlier. This is where you would go to be able to use the manual portion of the machine. Then you have coil change procedure. We talked about that when you load the film. You could go here and select it to bring the carriage to an ergonomic position so you can load and unload the film easily. Then you have general parameters. This is where you would enable different options that you may have purchased with this machine. For example, if you bought a top press for this unit or a remote control, you would go here to enable those features. This is something we would do at the factory. In these settings, there really isn't much you as a user should need to change. Then you have current values. Here you can see the current values of different aspects of the machine. The only one here you as a user might find useful is a carriage height. This would be useful if you want to specify a specific reinforcement height you want to wrap. By going here, you could determine which height you would want that set at. Then you have password. This is an area where you can lock out certain functions of this machine so that the users can't make any changes to certain areas of the machine. Password change, here's where you could change that password. Date and time, you could change the date and time here. USB features, this is where you can upload and download the parameter data and usage data. This is more for our use when we preset the machine before we ship it out. And again, if you did something at your place and someone messed up the settings, we could always get you back some information so that you could load a USB to here and get it back to the specific settings. Then you have service and maintenance. So that's an overview of the menu options. There's more specifics within the menu that we'll get to in a second. Within the menu, there's a category called cycle type. I touched on that briefly in the previous video, but I want to dig deeper into that and explain further. Let's take a look. So to get to the main menu, we just hit the jog down, and then if we scroll down, we're going to go over to cycle type and hit OK. When we get there, we're going to see some options. So the first one blinking says up and down. That's probably the most common setting that people use. So under this setting, the carriage will start at the bottom of the pallet, wrap upwards, and then when the photo eye detects the top of the pallet, the carriage will then come back down and complete the cycle at the bottom of the pallet. Then we have only downwards. So under this setting, the carriage will raise up to the top of the pallet, and the turntable will remain stationary while it does that. And then when the carriage gets to the top of the pallet, it will begin its wrap cycle going downward and finish at the bottom of the pallet. Then we have layers. This setting is designed to wrap as you build the pallet. So when you hit the start button, the machine will start to wrap the pallet with the carriage going upward until the photo eye no longer sees the pallet. You can then begin stacking your next layer and hit start to wrap the next layer. Then we have manual TSD, also known as top sheet. This cycle is designed to allow you to place a top sheet on the load, and it will wrap the top sheet to the pallet. When pressing start, the carriage will rise and wrap the pallet. Once the photo eye detects the top of the pallet, the carriage slightly moves down and the cycle stops. At this point, you put the top sheet on the pallet and hit start. The carriage will slightly go up and wrap the top sheet, and then the carriage will go back down to the bottom of the pallet, wrapping the pallet in the process. Then we have bi-pallet. This cycle is designed to wrap two pallets that are stacked on each other, so it reinforces where that middle pallet would be. Then we have only upwards. Under this setting, the carriage will start wrapping at the bottom of the pallet, and when it gets to the top, it'll stop and the cycle will be complete. So that's an overview of the cycle types. We do have some videos you can watch that show those cycle types in action. Let's take a closer look at the cycle parameters portion of the menu. This is where you can really make a lot of changes to your pallet configuration and make it exact to your specific application. So to get to the main menu, hit the jog down button. Then we're gonna go down to cycle parameters, and then we're gonna hit OK. First one here is bottom wraps. That's the number of times the pallet is gonna be wrapped on the bottom. So you can set that value here. It's at 1 right now. Top wraps, same thing, but on the top. Then you have film breaking. So that's the tension. So right now you see it's set at 40%. That's gonna be the tension that is gonna wrap the pallet throughout the whole cycle. Now, very important here, after this, we have variable tension settings. If this is at 40, it's not gonna take any of the next settings. So if you actually want these next settings to be live and active, this film breaking has to be at 0. If there's any value there, it's gonna read that first. So if we go to bottom wrap tension, it's at 50, but that's not gonna read it right now. Then we have ascent tension, top wrap tension, and descent tension. Then from there, we have rotation speed. That's gonna be how fast the turntable is gonna spin. Then we have ascent speed. This is where you set the speed for the carriage going up. If you have the tall pallet, you probably wanna have this go slower so that you get more coverage in the middle of the pallet. Descent speed, same thing. You wanna have it slower if you have a tall pallet, but if it's a short pallet, you would probably wanna speed it up. Delay braking time, that's really not something that you're gonna have to worry about. Flanging time, this is also known as the photo eye delay. This value is in seconds. So right now it's at 3 seconds. It's telling you how many seconds the carriage will continue to rise after the photo eye detects the height of the pallet. So the larger the number here, the bigger or more overwrap that you're going to have. Then we have pallet height. So if you turn the photo eye off, you can set this to just read a certain pallet height in centimeters. But if the photo eye is on, it's not gonna read this at all. So right here on the next one, enable photo cell, it shows on. That means the photo eye is on. If you wanted to use the previous one, you have to turn the photo eye off here. Then we have wrap pallets. That's the number of wrap pallets that there's been done in this specific saved pallet. Then we have coil change height. So earlier we showed you that you can hit the coil change procedure. You can change the height here if you want to go lower or higher. Then we have initial carriage height. This is gonna be if you want to start at a different height than at the lowest point. So you can set that here and it's gonna be in centimeters. Then we have final turn number. So if you wanna add more to your bottom wraps, you can add an additional turn here. Reinforcement height. If you want to have some reinforcement wraps on a pallet, then you would enter that here in the height that you would want it at. And then here, reinforcement turns, you would actually, basically say how many turns you want it to do. So it's like top and bottom wraps, but for a different part of the pallet. Then we have final tension revolutions. So if you set a value for the final turn number, which I mentioned before, you could set a different tension here. Then we have manual table speed. So when you're in manual mode, this is where you would change how fast the turntable would go. Remember, this is within the pallet configuration you're at. So if we're in pallet 1 right now, if we're in pallet 2, this would be a different value. Same thing, manual carriage speed, you can change that here. And then manual tension, that's where you change the tension here. Then from there, you have recipe name. That is where you can actually call this what you want. Instead of just saying pallet 1, you could call it whatever name you want for that pallet. Then you have end cycle height. If you want to end your cycle at a certain height and not go all the way down to the bottom of the pallet, you can enter the height you want the carriage to stop at here. If you do this, you would have to enable this in the general parameter called carriage final cut position, which is G20. So that's an overview of the cycle parameters. One thing I wanted to note is that if you have certain add-ons to this unit, like for example, auto cutoff or auto roping, you're gonna see more values in there than if you didn't. So later on, I'm actually going to do a video on auto roping and show you precisely how you would configure that. Now that we went through the overview of the controls, the menu options, the cycle types, the cycle parameters, we really equipped you with a lot of knowledge on this machine. I want to show you how you actually go in and make changes to your pallet configuration. So that way you can make it more precise to your liking. Let's take a look. So let's say I liked how pallet 1 wrapped, but I want to make some changes to it and save it as pallet 2. So right now I'm in pallet 2, I'm going to go to pallet 1. So now I'm in pallet 1, hit jog down to go to that menu, and I'm going to go down to cycle parameters to make some changes. So right now there's only 1 wrap on the bottom. I want to change that to 2, so I hit OK. I go up to change to 2, hit OK. Now I jog down to top wraps. I want to change that to 2 as well, hit OK. Change to 2, hit OK from there. And then I'd like to take a look at the tension. So it's set at 40. Let's say I wanted to do a little bit more. I want to go to 45. Let's change 45 there, hit OK. And then I'll go to the next one. Now remember, the bottom wrap tension isn't going to matter because we have a value in the previous one. So I want to go over to ascent speed and change that to 40. So if I hit OK here, it's at 80. I'm going to get it down to 40, hit OK. And now within the general parameters, that's really all I want to change. I want to hit escape. And what I want to do is go over to cycle type. And I believe that was going up and down. Yep. I want to change it to only go upwards. So I'm going to go there, hit OK. Now I have that set. So I've made all those changes. Now I want to go up to Save User Program, click OK. Now, if I save it now as pallet 1, it's going to make changes to pallet 1. What I want to do is actually make it for pallet 2. So I'm going to hit up, change it to 2. So I'm kind of doing a save as. And I click OK. And now I've saved it. So it's saving complete. Escape to return. And now pallet 2 is going to have all those changes that I made. It was going to be like pallet 1 with the changes that I made to pallet 2. And now should we all be set to wrap that pallet. So this unit comes equipped with an auto roping device, which is a standard feature on the 1100AA-C. On other models like the 1100 and the 1200, it's an option. I want to explain roping to you really quickly. Basically what it is normally when you're wrapping this pallet, the film is about 20-inch roll of film, so you got about 20 inches of film going around. If you want to rope, you can see this white bar right here, that gets pushed down, and you can set how much of a band you want. So if you really want a tight roping band, you're going to set it to 3 seconds. It's go all the way down, and you have a tight roping going all the way around it. If let's say you wanted roughly 12 inches of it, you'd set it to value to 1. So I'm going to go on the controls here and show you specifically the different type of roping you can do on this unit. So if I go into program 1, and then I hit jog down to get to the main menu. One thing I want to show you quick, if I go into cycle parameters, as is, you're not going to see that many roping options. So I'm going to skip through here to around 34. 34 is roping wraps. That's going to be number of wraps that you'd have on the bottom when it's at the very end of the cycle. You're going to have 1 anyways with the auto cut, auto attach feature. So usually this can be set to 0. But if you go any further, you'll see none of these are related to roping until you get to the final one, which is the tension of the roping on this. So it's set at 50. I want to show you how you access more of these. So if I go back and hit escape, go to general parameters. If I scroll down here and go to extra roping, if I click OK, it's on off right now. If I turn that on, hit OK. Now if I go back and I go to the cycle parameters, I'm going to see more roping options. So if I fast forward all the way to 34, we were at before, we have roping wraps right there, which I'm going to keep at 0. And then go through some of this stuff. Now when we get to 47 starting here, it wasn't showing before. So that's going to be talking about if I want to have how much roping I want to have, like if set value 1 through 3. So if I have it as a 3, it's going to go for 3 seconds down on that roper. So that way you have a really tight rope. And that's going to be the number of times I want it on the lower level. I'm going to skip that for now. Go to the next one. Rope time wrap up. So let's say on the way up, instead of having basically the 20 inches of roll of film wrapping, I'm saying I actually want, roughly 12 inches. So I actually want to have a little bit of roping. So if I go here and change this value and I change it to 2, it's going to drive it down for 2 seconds, and you'll see this when we do it, how it works. So I'm going to do 2 on the way up. Next one, as far as the top of it, I want to have a nice rope on the very top. So I'm going to do 3 seconds on the very top. Hit OK. And then after that, rope time wrap down. So I had it on the way up. I'm going to keep it as standard film on the way down. So I'm not going to touch that at all. Rope final time, I'm going to skip that for now. Initial, I'm going to skip that as well. Now, before I said I wanted a tight rope on the top. Now at 53, I want to say how many times do I want it to wrap on the top for that. So I'm going to set that value to 1 and hit OK. Then as I keep going, I got 55. That's the tension of the roping. So I'm going to turn that down a little bit because I have some roping going on here. I don't want it that high. I'm going to go to 35. All right, now I go escape, and then I go up, and I go to save user program. I'm going to save it to 1 because that's the one I was in, and hit OK. Now I save those changes. I'm going to hit start, and you'll see how the roping device works with the changes that I made to it. So now we're going to hit start. So first it's going to do that 1 bottom wrap that we have programmed already. And after that, the roper's going to kick in because we wanted a rope on the way up. If you wanted less roping and not so tight, you put a lower value on this. So when we get to the top, remember we had 1 top wrap set? So it's going to go back to normal wrapping. And then we also had 1 roping set at the top as well, so it's going to do that. Then it's going to go back normal and come back down.